Okay. Hi guys, good morning. I don't know how many of you are there. Okay. Akshay and Srivatsan are there. So we'll wait for a minute. We'll wait for a few minutes actually. Right. Let your friends join. So yeah, so if you have your friends' number, please text them. Ask them to come and join soon. So we'll start by max 10, 5 people. How many other people are there? We'll start with them. But again, if you have their numbers, please text them or call them. Okay, fine. We'll start, people. Okay, so let me share my screen. We'll start. Okay. So many pages I've created. I think just give me a moment, people. There are so many pages. Let me remove some of them. Okay, fine. I'll do this later. Okay, so yeah. So we have been doing chemical bonding, and as he said, we finished all types of covalent bonds. We studied them in depth, right? We saw VSEPR, valence bond theory, this molecular orbital theory, bond order, paramagnetism, diamagnetism, right? Bond order calculations, and with respect to bond order, what all you'll be able to predict, say the stabilities of the molecules, the bond lengths, right? And if you have same bond order, what will you do, right? I told you that the species having more number of electrons in bonding orbit also going to be more stable. I think you remember, we took the example of Li2 plus and Li2 minus, right? So all that we did, and then we went on to see the secondary types of bonds, right? So I told you that there are going to be 3 or 4 types of secondary types of bonds. And again, I told you that these are going to be molecular interactions. These are not atomic interactions, right? Between two compounds, right? How these compounds are going to exist together, right? So those kind of forces, those kind of interactions is what we're talking about, right? So we said I had something called as dipole interaction, right? So this we understood, is it not? We have a dipole, another dipole, and I'm going to have an interaction between them, right? The example was HF, or any polar compound, any polar bond will do good for this, right? Say if I have HF, you know there are going to be development of charges on this del plus and del minus, and another HF. Say again, I have del plus and del minus. So now you are going to have an interaction like this between the del negative of the first HF, I mean first fluorine, and the hydrogen of the next H of del positive and del negative. And again, I can have this side, I can have this side. It can be a big chain. I can even have 3-dimensional structures coming here, 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 right? Anything can happen, right? And what you have to visualize is this particular thing, like you have for a del negative and you have a del positive. There are 2 ways of visualizing the amount of interactions, or say the attractive force can be visualized in 2 ways, right? One is that, yes, this is a partial negative charge, partial positive charge. Yes, obviously I can have an electrostatic force of attraction. Now the other way of looking at it is would be this del positive can interact with the lone pair of electron present in fluorine, right? So that is also can be visualized. So basically, whenever you go for the secondary types of bonds, the 2 ways of visualization can be in terms of an ionic character, or in terms of your what is that, covalent character. In the sense, ionic character means del positive, del negative, like these two, del positive and del negative interaction, obviously ionic, right? Electrostatic forces of attraction. Or if you bring in the covalent character, right? So covalent character in the sense, I have the del positive is going to have interaction with this lone pair on fluorine. But anyways, like however you visualize, right? It is not going to make much of a difference, right? But if I go for other type, that is when I go, especially when I go for hydrogen bonding, right? This particular thing, what I told you actually makes sense, right? Okay, so that's about dipole. I can have something called as dipole ion interactions, right? Now again, from the name itself, you'll be able to understand I'm going to have a dipole, right? That means a polar bond and a complete ion. And the example we took for was like NaCl or any salt which is going to get dissolved in water, right? And they are going to get ionized, right? Say NaCl will give me Na plus and Cl minus, right? So this Na plus and Cl minus are going to get surrounded by water molecules. Say sodium is having a positive charge, and I can have an interaction with, I mean, sodium plus I can have an interaction with del negative of oxygen, right? Obviously, OH bond is polar in water, right? Again, Cl minus can have interaction with your del positive hydrogen, right? So that is my dipole ion interaction. And I told you, if you want to have a good solution, if you want to have high solubility for a particular solution, you have to make sure that the solute solvent interactions are greater than solute solute and solvent solvent, right? Than solvent solvent, right? So obviously I can even put a plus sign here. The total amount of interactions when you didn't form the solution, solute solute and solvent solvent interaction, when you put them together, if you want high solubility, the solute solvent interaction should be greater, in the sense the force of attraction between the solute and the solvent should be greater. And obviously when you have a dipole ion interaction coming into the picture, definitely the solute solvent interactions are going to become higher, and the solubility is going to be higher for a particular salt, right? Okay, so this is where we start last class, if you can remember, right? So next thing, what I have to do is I have to look at the most important of all the secondary bonds. That is my hydrogen bonding. Oops. Right? That's my hydrogen bonding. Again, you must have been looking at hydrogen bonding in various scenarios in your organic chapters. Say you will say that because of hydrogen bonding, I'm going to have high solubility. Because of hydrogen bonding, and they say that they have the high boiling point, right? Lot of stuff, lot of indirect, like say, even if you go, I don't know how many of your biology students here, say when you go for DNA or RNAs, right? So not RNA, when you go for DNA, for example, DNA is a double helix, isn't it? Like, I don't want to draw it because I'm very bad at very bad at drawing. If you can remember, it's a double helix, right? Like you must have it. Anyway, DNA you have seen in pictures, like say movies, so many things, right? So what do you see? Say if I have this as the one strand of DNA, and say another strand of DNA is like this, right? So like it's not like these two strands are going to be covalently bonded, no. But the elements or the things in one of the strand, yes, they are chemically bonded. You will study about them. Maybe you must have studied biomolecules by this time. I think you know what is it. In a DNA, I'm going to have a nucleotide, nucleoside. All these things are going to be there, right? And adenine, guanine, thymine, cytosine, if it's going to be DNA, right? All these things will be there. So this one of the strand is going to be the proper bond, chemical bonds together. Say I can have a sequence like A, G, C, A, G, G, C, some sequence can be there, right? And obviously another strand, like again, will be properly bonded. This another strand is again going to be properly bonded. But how this strand and this strand are able to coexist together is explained by the help of hydrogen bonding. Not only hydrogen bonding, but there are other types of secondary bonds called as disulfide interactions. But again, most important of them all is going to be hydrogen bonding, right? Uh, like you can even decide in terms of your sometimes the densities, right? So lot of stuff. If you can understand hydrogen bonding, right, you will be able to answer a lot of small interesting questions. Okay, so we'll move on about it, right? I'll make a page. Oh, sorry. Yeah, right. So again, I would say hydrogen bonding is again going to be a dipole-dipole or a dipole-ion interaction, but it is given a special name because it's going to be one of the strongest secondary bonds we can have. Not one of the strongest. It is the strongest secondary bond I can have, right? Okay. Now, for hydrogen bonding to occur, for say two molecules, two compounds to involve in hydrogen bonding, right? There is only two requirements. Now, the first requirement is that I should have something called as hydrogen donors, right? And second thing I should have is what is called as hydrogen acceptors, right? I should have something called as hydrogen donors, and I should have something called as hydrogen acceptors. And if these two are there, yes, hydrogen bonding can happen, right? Okay, now what you have to understand is, what do you mean by this hydrogen donor? What kind of molecules can be hydrogen donors, and what kind of molecules can be hydrogen acceptors? This is the next question which comes to our mind, right? So how do I put it is now for a molecule to be hydrogen donor, right? You have to have a hydrogen, right, attached to a very highly electronegative element. When I put En, right, that means it's the hydrogen atom should be covalently bonded to a very highly electronegative element, right? And we don't have much, like, so many electronegative elements. I mean highly electronegative elements we don't have much, right? So this is pretty simple for me. If you find that this electronegative element is any of these three, that is fluorine, nitrogen, and oxygen, right? So whenever you see an HF bond, NH bond, or an OH bond, you can blindly say that this particular molecule can be a hydrogen donor. Say ammonia, alcohol, water, whatnot, carboxylic acids, anything, say primary amines, secondary amines, all of that are actually going to have your hydrogen. Hey, one second. Uh, when we spoke about your basic character of amines, did I teach you this already, guys? When we saw your basic character of amines, that to an aqueous state, did I teach you all this before? Yes, no? Okay, I just touched upon it. Okay, okay, cool. Then I can go in depth. Not a big deal. Cool. Right. So yeah, right. So you should have for a molecule to be hydrogen donor, you should have the hydrogen atom attached to any of these three, right? Oh, what happened? Right, any of these three should be there. Okay, now it's pretty simple. Hydrogen donors are pretty simple, right? Now what about hydrogen acceptors? Now hydrogen acceptors are also going to be very simple. Now it's like the only criteria for any molecule to be a hydrogen acceptor is that I should have lone pairs on them, right? At least one lone pair of electrons must be there on that particular compound. Any element, say I have two elements present in a compound, either one of them, if they have a lone pair, yes, well and good. They are going to act as hydrogen acceptors, right? Okay. Now, how are we going to visualize how the covalent bond? I mean, how the hydrogen bonding can happen, right? Okay. Now, please understand there can be molecules, right? There can be molecules which can act as both hydrogen donors as well as hydrogen acceptors by themselves, right? Because they will satisfy both the criteria. They have a hydrogen atom attached to a highly electronegative element, and say they have a lone pair of electron also in that particular atom, right? So the both and best example I can give you is water molecule. Right? So you can see how it is. I have a hydrogen donor capability. OH bond is there, two OH bonds are there, and obviously oxygen is going to have two lone pairs present on it, right? So that's water is one of the best examples I can have for hydrogen bonding to get explained, right? So it's pretty simple how you can explain it, right? So now let me put it like this. I have a del positive on this hydrogen, right? And obviously you can put del negative on this hydrogen, or you can even speak in terms of lone pair, but doesn't matter. Okay, so now I say I have another oxygen, I mean another water molecule, right? So again, I'm going to have a lone pair here. Again, say I have a del positive here. Now what I can have is I can have an interaction between this del positive and the lone pair on the previous oxygen molecule. And same goes here. I can have an interaction between this hydrogen plus and the oxygen's lone pair. Or you can even say that I'm going to have an interaction between the del positive of the hydrogen and del negative, sorry, right? I can have the interaction between the del positive of the hydrogen and del negative of the oxygen molecule. But the proper way of putting it is to look into the lone pairs only. The better way of understanding is I have del positive hydrogen and the lone pair on oxygen is what is going to have interaction, right? So this exactly is what is called as your hydrogen bonding, right? Very simple, right? Okay. Now, what are the types of hydrogen bonding? This you already know, right? I have something called as intermolecular hydrogen bonding. Again, started. Don't tell me. Till now it was fine. Intermolecular, and I have something called as intramolecular hydrogen bonding, right? So what do you mean by this? I think you'll be able to understand this if you take a real life example. Say when I have inter-school competitions and intra-school competitions. Inter-school competitions is where I have many schools are participating, right? Inter-school competitions is where, say, in your school they're hosting say a sports event, and it's an inter-school sports event. So many schools, nearby schools, will come and participate in the competitions. If it is going to be an intra-school, intra-school competition, it's like your sports day, right, or an annual day, whatever it is. You within your school you participate, right? So that's about intra and inter. So same goes with the hydrogen bonding also, right? So in intermolecular, right, I'm going to have two molecules, and one is going to act as a hydrogen acceptor, the other one is going to act as a hydrogen donor, just like this, what you see here. See, two molecules in the sense I don't need to have two different molecules, same molecule, but one is going to act as hydrogen donor, the other one is going to act as a hydrogen acceptor, right? This is an example. What you saw here for water is a perfect example for your intermolecular hydrogen bonding, right? Now, if you want to see example for an intramolecular, I think again you should have known the best example I can have is orthonitrophenol. Say I have OH, and say I have an NO2, right? Now, what do you see? Obviously, the oxygen is having a lone pair on this, right? Or I can say del negative, and this hydrogen is going to have a del positive. So I can have an interaction between these two. Say I can even mark it together, right? So the hydrogen of this and the oxygen of the nitrogen is going to have an interaction, hydrogen bonding, right? Okay. Now, the next question is, sir, which is stronger? Intermolecular is stronger or intramolecular is stronger? You always remember that intermolecular is always stronger hydrogen bond than intramolecular compounds. I mean, intramolecular hydrogen bonding, right? So obviously, this kind of things, what you saw in water or HF or ammonia or alcohol, all these things are obviously more greater or stronger than your intramolecular hydrogen bonding. Okay, right? So now, like if I ask you, say, if I ask you to compare, right? If I ask you to compare two molecules, right? And ask you to where I'm going to have more extent of hydrogen bonding. If, if I ask you that question, okay, let me take some examples for that. Right. Now, let me compare the extent of hydrogen bonding happening in H2O and ammonia. Okay, let me compare these two. Right. Now, let me know structures also. Ammonia. I have a lone pair also, and obviously here also I have two lone pairs. Right. Okay. Now, if I look at the strength of interaction between H2, and NH3 hydrogen bond. Now what? Now, okay, let me ask you this question. How many of you think, let me take a vote. How many of you think NH3 or say, okay, H2O is going to have more extent, more stronger hydrogen bonding? Or I can just put NH3. Oh, I stopped it. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. So what I was telling, where is my OneNote? Okay. So what I was telling, you can just put it in the chat, whether it's NH3 or H2O. Everybody, just go for it. It's just a guess. H2O. Okay. One vote for H2O. Hurry, everybody. Okay, 3 H2Os. Okay, 4 H2Os. 5, 6. I think that's it. That's the number of people I have, I guess. No, we have, I think, 2 more. Okay, anyways, no issues. So anybody cares to explain why do you think H2O is going to have a stronger hydrogen bond? Any idea? You can unmute yourself and speak if you know something.
Sir, one thing is that oxygen is more electronegative than nitrogen, and that
Okay.
oxygen has two lone pairs, whereas nitrogen has only one.
Okay, yes, these two are the reasons. Absolutely true. Very good. Right. So you can see. So first things first. Okay. If I don't know anything about electronegativity, right? First thing I will look at is there are going to be three hydrogens which can involve in hydrogen bonding, but I can have only two hydrogens here involving in hydrogen bonding, right? So that actually little favors ammonia, but still we'll look at other aspects. As I think, who was that who told the answer? I don't know who's that.
Sriharini, sir.
Okay. So as Sriharini said, right, we'll look into that aspects also. Right. So yeah. So here, as you said, there are going to be two lone pairs, obviously. Right. So there are going to be two lone pairs. So accommodation of hydrogen the hydrogens coming from other water molecules are going to be little higher. I have more space for the hydrogen bonding to happen because I have one extra lone pair. Right. And also, if you look at the amount of partial positive charge, right? If I look at the amount of partial positive charge on the hydrogen on the oxygen, I mean water molecule, and the hydrogen on the ammonia, as obviously now since oxygen is more electronegative, right? Oxygen is more electronegative. Say if I call it as del 1 plus, and here it is say del 2 plus. Obviously, del 1 plus is going to be greater than del 2 plus. Why? Because nitrogen is less electronegative and oxygen is more electronegative. So the development of partial charges on the hydrogen of water is going to be greater. Obviously, the strength of interaction is also going to be greater than that. So if you look at the what is that ionic ionic point of view, in the sense if you talk in terms of partial charges also, yes, that I'm going to have more partial charge. Or even if you look in terms of your covalent character, that means in terms of the lone pairs, yes, oxygen molecule is going to have more lone pair, and one more extra lone pair when compared to ammonia. So obviously H2O has more extent or more stronger hydrogen bonds than water, I mean, than ammonia, right? And that's the reason why it exists in liquid state more predominantly, right? Because of this only H2 will exist in liquid state. Liquid ammonia, yes, it is possible. I have liquid ammonia as a solvent in so many places, but again, it is not that much of a stable liquid, right? The entropically favored, this thing is going to go to the entropically favored. Okay, nice word. But again, you don't know entropic favored in the sense, like we'll see thermodynamics. Anyways, so the favorable conditions for ammonia is to be in your gaseous state, and for H2O it is going to be in liquid state because I'm going to have more extent of hydrogen bonding, right? Okay, fine. So this is understood. Now that being said, say if I ask you, okay, if I see what happens with CH3OH. That is your alcohol, right? Okay, now here also I can have hydrogen bonding, right? I have two lone pairs on oxygen, right? And obviously I have a del positive on this hydrogen. So again, I can have hydrogen bonding. Okay, so what are the consequences, right? What are the consequences of having hydrogen bonding, right? Now the first consequence, if you have basically, if you have a molecule, right? If you have a molecule which can act as both hydrogen donor as well as hydrogen acceptors, so they will have high boiling points, right? Now this is possible only when you have same molecule which can act as hydrogen donor as well as hydrogen acceptor. Like alcohol, this can act as both. H2O, it can act as both. Ammonia, again, it can act as both, right? So all these things, whichever molecule is capable of undergoing hydrogen bonding by themselves without any involvement of any other molecule, in the sense any other different molecule, right? So they will definitely have high boiling points. Okay, now how do I put it is that, see, for example, forget, like, let me ask you this question. I have C5H10, right? And say I have C6H12, something like this, right? Now, which do you think will have more boiling point?
C6H12.
Obviously, right? So we said that it is going to be because of molecular masses, like more molecular mass, more boiling point, right? So if you look at water molecule is one of the very smallest species. Oxygen atom is small, two hydrogen atoms are very small. So the mass, the molecular mass of it is also very small, 18 grams, one of the least molecular masses you can have in all the compounds, right? but it is having a boiling point of 100 degrees Celsius, which is way more than whatever. Even if you have, say, 1,000 or whatever it is, like even if you have a molecular mass of 1,000, right? I don't think 100 degrees Celsius, a liquid having 100 degrees Celsius, the boiling point is too much. Like maybe you don't realize it, we don't realize it because we are doing it. We are doing it on an everyday basis. But if you have been exposed to different types of liquids and their boiling points, you will really understand how much 100 degrees Celsius is really high. Like how high is 100 degrees Celsius? Okay, so being a small molecule with so much less molecular mass, H2O is having a very high boiling point. The only and only reason is our hydrogen bonding. Okay, right? So that's the first consequence of having hydrogen bonding, right? Okay, now second one is that now we can talk about solubility, right? Say now in the sense, like it's not about now same molecule acting as hydrogen donor and hydrogen acceptor. Now I can have one molecule to be hydrogen donor, another molecule going to be called as hydrogen acceptor. Like just like say, okay, I think we should okay, let me put that if I have hydrogen bonding, I can have high solubility, but I will explain this by taking an example, right? Fine. So two consequence, high boiling point and high solubility. High boiling point, same molecule should act as hydrogen donor or hydrogen acceptor. We'll see how this works. High solubility. Okay, right. Now, let me take, say, C5H12, that is your pentane with, say, I'll take CH3, CH2, O. I say 5 carbon atoms. 1, 2, 3. Totally 5. This side 2, this side 3. So basically, this is my ether, and this is my normal hydrocarbon equivalent of that. Okay. Now, obviously, now if I look at which is going to be more soluble in water, right? Obviously, the answer we know that this is going to be more soluble in water, right? Now, why is it like this? We will go for that. Obviously, I think you should have known the answer by this time, but still I'll explain. Right? Say if I have H2O, now you can see that, say, if I'll take a normal simple molecule, CH3O, CH3 acetone, right? And say if obviously this is having lone pair, but see this molecule. Now tell me, can this molecule act as hydrogen donor?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Why? Why? Why
Sir,
it
partial
cannot act as
charges
hydrogen?
aren't developed.
Sorry.
Partial charges aren't developed.
Okay, so basically you have to say that you have oxygen molecule, you have hydrogen, I mean, you have oxygen atom, you have hydrogen atom, but that hydrogen atom is not attached to the oxygen atom, it's attached to some other less electronegative element. So definitely, as the reason is very simple, as you said, there is no enough development of partial charges, right? Because hydrogen is not attached to a highly electronegative element, but this can act as a hydrogen donor. Sorry, this can act as a hydrogen acceptor. Why? Because I have two lone pairs on this oxygen. Right. So now when I dissolve this in water, which obviously can act as a hydrogen donor or a hydrogen acceptor. So obviously I can have a del positive. Now I can have an interaction. Right. So obviously this makes, right. I told you again, solute, solvent. If you have solute and solvent interaction should be greater, then I will have high solubility. So that's why we say that acetones are generally high soluble in water. And the reason being is that I'm going to have hydrogen bonding between your acetone molecule and the water molecule. That's how you have to explain it, right? But if you look at the boiling point of this acetone, it is having, I think, a boiling point of around 40, or I think way lesser boiling point. And the reason is I don't have hydrogen bonding in this molecule by itself cannot act as both hydrogen donor and hydrogen acceptor, right? So the boiling point is less, but the solubility of that is in water is high because I can have hydrogen bonding with water, right? So I think this explains a lot, right? Okay, so the two consequences, high boiling point and high solubility, I think it's you understood whatever it is, right? Okay, now anything else I have to say in hydrogen bonding? Yeah, that's it, right? So these are things you have to know about hydrogen bonding. Okay, right? Now there are actually one small topic which I left in this chemical bonding chapter, that will look into it. Okay, fine. So any questions till now, people? Any question? Oh, yeah. Wait, hydrogen bonding is over. We have one last thing in here is your van der Waals forces that we'll see. And then we have to go for that part which I left out. Okay, so any questions till now? You want to ask me anything? Okay, cool. So I hope everything is clear. We'll move on. So the next thing we'll see is my last type of interaction. That is your secondary interaction. That is my van der Waals force. Right. Now this is a universal force. Right. Universal force means between anything and everything, I can have van der Waals force. Right. Okay, now how do I explain this? Where this force is arriving from? Right, all these things you have to understand. Right now, I would say in all these things you saw till now, dipole ion, hydrogen bonding, all these happens because of permanent polarity in the molecule, is it not? I have a permanent separation of charges happening, right? I have a electronegative element, and one is having a positive charge, one is having a negative charge. So this is permanent polarity. This happens because of permanent polarity, right? Now, if you go for van der Waals force, I'm going to tell you the statement that this happens, or the reason behind this is happening is because of development of temporary polarity in any molecule for that matter, any molecule, any element, anything, like literally anything, right? I'm going to have some temporary polarity getting developed. And because of that, again, I'm going to have some interactions. Okay, right? Now we'll try to understand what exactly is this, right? Fine. Okay. Now understand, see, I have a nucleus in the center, and say I have some orbitals, and say I have an electron here. Okay, right? Now, obviously, we know that this electron is going to be continuously revolving around the nucleus. Yes, right? Okay, now assume that, say, this electron has moved a little bit distance, and say this is the position of the electron. Right? Let me, if I can use a different color, maybe it will help. Oh God, this was not expected. Right, wait, I'll try it again. Okay, so nucleus, an electron, and let me change the color. Maybe to red. No, red will not be good. Okay, green. Right, fine. So like say the electron has moved this far and the electron is here now. Okay, see, this scenario is going to happen in, like, I don't know, in I don't know, 10 power minus 20 seconds. Like it's very fast, right? Electron almost moves the speed of light. All electromagnetic radiations move the speed of light. Okay, so anyways, so the electron has moved this far. Okay, now please understand, people, I had some molecule like HF, right? So the electron was supposed to be there in the center, in the exact center, but the electron cloud is little moving towards fluorine, right? If it has a center, you don't see any development of charges, right? But if it is going to move towards one particular place, in this case, it is going to be fluorine, or any other, you can even put a point in space, right? So what is happening there? To the position where the electron is moving, right? From one position to another position, it's moving. So wherever the position, the final position of the electron is, that is your fluorine, what you saw there, you saw that I'm going to have a del negative there. Yes. Right, you had a del negative there, and wherever the electron has moved away from, that is basically from the center, it is moving away from hydrogen. So that's why you saw that there is going to be a partial positive charge on this hydrogen. Yes, right? Okay, now the same thing is only happening here. Electron was initially one in position, and say now in a very small time gap, it has come to this final position, right? So can I tell that because of this movement of electron, right, I can say that from the position where it has moved from, just like moving away from hydrogen, it is moving from this point, I can say that there is a small, very small del positive, right? And to the position where the electron has moved now, there I will have a very small negative charge, a partial negative charge developed there, right? Now, if there are two such things nearby, say here I have a del negative, Here I have a del positive. Say, assuming the electron movement is such that, right? Now what I can have an interaction between this. I can have an interaction between this, right? So this exactly is what is called as your van der Waals force, right? The interaction which you get developed because the movement of electron from the position where the electron has moved away, there I'll have a partial positive, to the position where I have the electron has moved from, into where the position it is now, there I'll have a del negative. Now I can have the same thing happening in all the atoms. If I have 1,000 atoms, all these 1,000 atoms where I can have an interaction with this, and I mean the development of charges, and obviously the neighboring molecules are going to have the interaction between the del positive and the del negative. But as we said, this is going to be very temporary. Why? Because the electron moves so fast, like that you will not be even able to realize all this happening. Like you need to have a ultra slow motion. I don't think we have that kind of technology right now, right? So for all this to be visualized, okay. But this is what exactly is hydrogen bond. Sorry, van der Waals force. Okay, so everybody, and again, see what you can understand is this. I told you when I said that this is going to be a universal force. Why did I say that? Can you comment on that statement? I said that van der Waals force is a universal force. Why did I say that? Any idea?
Everything in this world is made up of atoms, and atom has electrons.
Wonderful. Exactly right. Anything in the world, any matter we call is made up of atoms, and all the atom at least have one electron. Even it's only hydrogen, they're going to have one electron at least, right? So that's why I said that it is going to be a universal force, right? So between anything and everything. So that is why we say, like, see, understand, if the molecular interactions are going to be like this, right? So if I have more and more number of electrons, right? If I have more and more number of electrons, what will happen? All these things will happen in an aggravated manner, right? That is the reason why I say when we have more molecular mass, actually we should not call it as more molecular mass. Instead of this, we should call it as atomic number, right? So more and more is atomic number, more and more is the boiling point. That's why we say, because now the interaction in this between two molecules are going to be really strong. So if you have more number of electrons, you have to supply more energy for you to break this, right? And then convert them into the gaseous state, right? So that is the reason behind this statement. More molecular mass, more boiling point. It's because I'm going to have more van der Waals force and obviously more boiling point, right? So now there is one more aspect to this. One more aspect is my surface area, right? So if the surface area is very high, right? The surface area is very high. Again, I can say surface area in the sense, how can I make you visualize is, okay, say I have a layer of atoms like this, okay, that line which I draw here, and assume that above this is a very huge surface area, right? This is a very huge surface area. It's a small, like huge surface area is there. Say on top of that, right? Say I can even put it like this. Assume that this is coming towards you. The second line is towards you, like to that means coming out of the computer screen. So obviously, more and more is the surface area, more and more are the type of amount of interaction I can have. Okay, so that is why we say when I go for same isomers, say I have C5H10, I have your N-pentane, and say if I have 2-methyl-butane. Okay, hope you understand. C5H12, I'm sorry, C5H12, I have the normal straight chain molecule. And say if I have the branched isomer of that, right? We say that the straight chain molecule is going to have more boiling point. Why? Because it has more surface area. And more surface area means more van der Waals force and obviously more boiling point. Okay, so that I think all these things are now coming. You are connecting the dots. Whatever you have studied, I think you're able to connect the dots. And I think really you should be appreciating this, like small things, whatever you're learning, right? Not for the mark aspect of this, but for the knowledge, scientific aspects of that, right? So definitely you should be able to appreciate this. Okay, so yeah, that's about your secondary types of bonds: dipole-dipole, dipole-ion, hydrogen bonding, and your van der Waals force. Yes. Okay. Cool. Now there is one part which I missed that I take now. Okay, fine. So the thing is, people, any covalent. When we now spoke only about your ionic bonds separately and your covalent bonds also separately, right? But in reality, what happens is if I have a covalent compound, right? If I have a covalent compound, it will also have some ionic character, right? Same goes with an ionic compound. If I have an ionic compound, I will always have some covalent character in that, right? Now this, what to say, ionic character in covalent compounds, this we already saw, right? This we already saw. How? Ionic character in covalent compounds. How did you saw? How did you see this? How did you bring an ionic character in covalent compounds? Why is it so silent? Nobody knows. How? Now I'm telling you, this we have already seen. Now just think about what and all we have seen in covalent compounds and tell me what is that? What explains this ionic, little bit of ionic character, not like perfectly ionic character. Obviously, that is not possible, right? So some ionic character in covalent compounds, how did we explain this?
In polar molecules.
Obviously, right. In polar molecules, what do you have there? You have development of charges, partial positive, partial negative, right? So all these things which we already saw, this particular part is done, right? And how do you quantify it? Any idea? How do you quantify the ionic character in covalent compounds? Is there anything which you can think of? We already saw this again. Let me see if you can tell that answer. I'm asking, how do you determine, okay, this much is the percentage of ionic character in a covalent compound? With what will you decide that? In polar compounds, did we measure anything with respect to this charge? Did we measure, or is there any quantity which we saw which is going to help you, a physical quantity? No? Yes? Okay, so the answer is, I'll give you 10 more seconds, and don't kick yourself if after I give you the answer, because it's easy.
Sir, is that like the less electronegative atom must have less ionization energy?
Less electronegative atom should have less ionization energy. No, that is about, you're talking about atoms there, right? But in a compound, how will you bring an ionization energy there? We define ionization energy only for atoms, right? Okay, so the answer is dipole moment. This exactly is the thing which we did, right? What happened there? Dipole moment is equal to what? Q into D. What happened there? So this is the quantification which you're talking about. With the help of dipole moment, actually you will be able to understand how much of ionic character, what is this Q? Basically, these are the partial charges developed on the polar compound, isn't it? So with the help, obviously I told you D has very less role to play in dipole moment, at least in chemistry part of it, because the D is very small, right? But Q, the amount of partial charges developed, right? That actually is a major, not concern, that is a major contributor to this dipole moment. Okay, so obviously with the help of dipole moment, if you calculate dipole moments for different covalent compounds, and we find that for one of the molecule, the dipole moment is higher, and for the other molecule, it is going to be lesser. That means in the first molecule where I had more dipole moment has more ionic character. Or I can even put in other words, the dipole moment is directly proportional to the amount of ionic character I can have in a molecule. So like this, you can compare which is having more ionic character, which is having less ionic character, with the help of a dipole moment. Okay, right? Fine. So that is done. Now this is easy. The first part is very easy. Now if I look into the opposite, that is covalent character in ionic compounds. Okay. Now, oh, sorry. Right. So now this we have to see. This we don't know. Right. How is it that a covalent in ionic compound completely like there is no basically what to say, like you have a positive charge, you have a full negative charge. It's purely electrostatic, right? But in that purely electrostatic field, how is it that I'm going to bring your covalent? Because that means basically I'm trying to tell that there is going to be some say very little sharing of electron also happening in ionic compounds. Okay, now how are we going to visualize this? Right, now for this you need to understand a physical phenomena called as polarization. Right, you have to understand a physical phenomena called as not your polarization which you see in physics. The polarization we say is that, say when you go for your optical isomerism, also I told you about polarization, right? You have what is that? The normal light will vibrate in all the three directions, but if you put it inside a polarizer, right, the thing which is coming out is what is called as your plane polarized light, right? And that plane polarized light is going to have the vibrations only in one direction. So that is different, right? Here the polarization is a little different, like the sense is a little different. Okay, we'll try to understand what is that. Okay, now please understand, people. I have a positive charge, a small positive charge, and say I have a negative charge in an ionic compound, right? Okay, right. Now what is going to happen is obviously this negative charge is having so much electron density, so many electrons are there in this. Okay, right? And this particular species of cation is actually have high affinity for electrons. Okay, but it's not like from anion to cation the electron is going to jump. No, that is not going to happen. But because I have very high positive charge and the electrons, I'm going to have a little stronger interaction. What is going to happen is, let me maybe put another color, right? So the perfectly symmetric field here, you see a green color, what to say, this is particularly a spherically symmetric field, right? Now this field is going to get distorted in the sense that it is not going to be like this. The field is gonna come something like this. Okay, so hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Right, so what do you see? What is the orbitals? See the thing which is marked here in black, right? These are the orbitals of this anion coming closer towards the cation. Hope you understand. Again, I repeat, I have a cation, right? And I have some high electron density on the anion, right? So obviously I can have some kind of attraction happening between the cation and the electrons on the anion, right? So because of this interaction, what is going to happen is I expect a spherically symmetric field for your anion, but it is not going to be that way. It is actually that this field is getting distorted by means of this. That means the orbitals of this anion is going to move very little closer to this cation. So again, why this happens is because of the attractive force between the cation and the electron. Okay, this particular phenomenon is what is called as your polarization. Okay, fine. Now the thing is, who is getting polarized and who is polarizing who? Is the two questions you have to. Again, I ask that question: who is polarizing and who is getting polarized? Do you want to answer the question? Who is getting polarized and who is polarizing?
So the negative ion gets polarized.
Yes, obviously, right? So we talk about, see, whichever is getting distorted, whichever the electric field is getting distorted, that I say is getting polarized. So the anions gets polarized, right? And the cations polarize the anions. Polarize the negative charge. I'll keep it like this, right? So anions gets polarized and the cation polarize the negative charge, polarize the anion. Okay, so obviously more and more is the distortion happening. See, you can see, right? Obviously, what happens in a covalent bond? In a covalent bond, two orbitals come closer and they're going to, oh wait, right? So two orbitals come closer and they overlap. That is a perfect covalent bond, right? Two orbitals come closer and they perfectly overlap, and that's your perfect covalent bond. But here what is happening? They're not overlapping because they're already ionic compounds, but still the orbitals are going to trying to come closer. So that is why we say that it brings in some kind of covalent character in these ionic compounds. Okay, obviously, and more is the distortion, or more and more is the polarization happening, more and more is the covalent character. Is that it? Right now, if you have, I didn't ask this question, but this question was asked to me by a student, I think 1 or 2 years back. Sir, you're telling that what is that? Cations are attracting the electrons, and that field is getting distorted. What about the anion? They're already highly electronegative, right? The anions are highly electronegative, and it's not like I don't have any electrons on cation. Cations also having electrons, right? So will there be any distortion of field? Right? Will there be any polarization of the cation also? And the anion is going to getting, which is polarizing the cation. The answer is yes. It is possible, but the amount of distortion is so small that it can be negligible. Again, I repeat, right? So the cations can also get polarized. The electrons on them, that means the orbitals on the cation, can move little towards your anions also because of the electronegativity of the anion. But again, that is very small, right? That is negligible. But yeah, we cannot say that it is not happening. Both side polarization is happening, but which is dominant? Whatever we spoke about, that is the anions getting polarized and the cation polarizing them, is what is more dominant. Or I would say like mostly dominant. Other one is pretty negligible. Okay, right, fine. So we'll move on. We'll try to understand how are, as I told you, how more and more polarization, more and more covalent character. So obviously we have to understand how are we going to quantify this. Now we understood what do you mean by polarization and what is happening. Now we have to quantify it. How much polarization, how much covalent character. So that will go, right? Fine. Now actually you can see this in the form of a rule, right? There is something called as Fejon's rule. I think I think some bells are getting ring in your, some bells are ringing in your mind. Fejon's rule. Okay, we can see it in form of a rule, but again, you can see it in form of logic also. Okay, now it's pretty simple, right? So fine, let me look at the cations first. Right now, I know cations are the one which are polarizing the anion, right? So whenever you speak about cations, you speak about a term called as polarizing power. So I think I missed a I. Okay, so you saw some, you speak in terms of something called as polarizing power. What do you mean by polarizing power? Ability of the cation to polarize the anion. Right? That's what we call it as polarizing power. Now, obviously, more and more is the polarizing power, more and more is the polarization, more and more is the covalent character. Right? Now, how do we decide which cation, say if I give you two cations, Na plus, Mg2 plus, which will have more polarizing power? So that all will try to answer the questions. Right? So what you have to understand is, people, this polarizing power is directly proportional to the charge density. It's not just proportional to charge, it is proportional to the charge density of the cation. Okay, this is a G, this is an A. Okay, right. So what do you mean by charge density? Nothing. Charge density is charge divided by size. Okay, charge density is, in perfect words, if you want me to give, this is not, instead of calling it as size, I can call it as volume. Right? Obviously, volume and size similar, right? So what do you mean by charge density? Charge density is charge by volume. Okay, in a small volume, if I have very high charge, that means I have high charge density and I have high polarizing power. Okay, now with this itself, you'll be able to answer the question which I asked you, right? So I can tell you that a polarizing power is directly proportional to the amount of charge, right? Obviously, right? When I have 1 plus, and if I have a 2 plus cation, definitely the amount of charge in 2 plus cation is more. And obviously, more and more is the amount of positive charge. More and more will be the attractive force between the cation and the electron on the anion. And obviously, more polarizing power and more covalent character. Okay, so more and more is the charge, obviously more and more is the polarizing power. Okay, second one, if you look at the size of the cations, now you can see from this itself, you can see it is inversely related. Volume is in the denominator, right? So you can say it is inversely related to the size, right? And obviously more polarizing power, more covalent character. I would say directly proportional to the covalent character, right? So directly the polarizing power is directly proportional to the covalent character. And how do you decide the polarizing power? It is just directly proportional to the charge density. Charge density is charge divided by volume. And it's, from this you can understand more and more charge, more and more covalent character, and more size, less and less is the covalent character, right? So that is about the cation. And this is what is Fajon's rule also it says, right? So if I compare, for example, I have NaCl, Ng, oh wait, right? NaCl, NgCl2, and say I have AlCl3, right? And I ask you to arrange them in the order of covalent character, right? Now you see all the anions are same. There's no change in that, but the cations are different. I have Na plus, I have Mg2 plus, and I have Al3 plus, right? So obviously, what did I say? More and more is the covalent, sorry, more and more is the charge on the cation, more and more is the covalent character. So I can blindly say that AlCl3 will be more covalent than MgCl2, and NaCl is most ionic or the least covalent, however you want to call it. This is this thing of covalent character, right? Okay, now they can even ask you the question like this: which of the following will be high? Like arrange all these three in the order of solubility in water, like that. Also they can ask, right? So what you have to understand: more and more ionic the compound is, more and more will be the solubility. Please remember this. The same question, like they can ask you directly covalent character, ionic character, or they can indirectly ask you arrange the following in the order of solubility in water. Again, the solvent is very important. If it's a polar solvent like water, then more and more is the ionic character, more and more is the solubility. That is understood, like dissolves like, right? And obviously, if they tell you arrange the following in the order of solubility in, say, something like a DMSO or DMFO, an inorganic solvent, that is, say, an organic solvent, that is non-polar solvent. Okay, so in that case, you have to go for more and more covalent character, more and more is the solubility. I think let me put these points here so that you can take down, right? So when I look at the they can same thing. So first, if I take first, let me put the solvent. If I have polar solvents like water, right? The covalent character is inversely related to the solubility. However you want to call it, more ionic character, more solubility, or more covalent character, less solubility, however it is. Because since we just stick to one of the things, we stick to covalent character because Fajon's rule directly tells about the covalent character. Okay, now if it's going to be a non-polar solvent, right, in that covalent character is directly proportional to the solubility. More and more covalent character, more and more is the solubility. Like, so again, the question can be twisted and asked like this in terms of solubility in copolar solvents or solubility in non-polar solvents. So again, if you know the covalent character or the ionic characters of the different species, you can easily tell the answer. Okay. So yeah, that's about solubility. So we saw about cations. We'll see about anions also, right? So when I go for anions, Right. Now, anions, you will, again, you spoke for cations in terms of polarizing power. Now here, the anions are getting polarized, right? So that term which we'll use is polarizability, right? Polarizability. Okay, what do you mean by polarizability? Ability of the anion to get polarized. How much ability it has, how much extent it has for undergoing the polarization, right? That is my polarizability. Okay, now please understand the electric field or the orbitals of this thing, orbit anion should get distorted, right? So now how can I visualize this? So again, there are going to be two factors. One is size, the other one is charge. Now tell me how polarizability is related to size. What do you think? Directly related or inversely related? What do you think, people? The ability of the anion, I have a smaller anion, bigger anion, which can easily get polarized.
Sir, is it directly proportional?
Yes, absolutely right. See, if I have a small anion and a big anion, right? So here you see that the electrons which are here is very strongly attracted to the nucleus. Now here, these electrons are little far away from the nucleus, so they can be easily distorted than in this case. Okay, so easily I can say that polarizability, and obviously polarizability is directly proportional to the covalent character. Please don't forget that both polarizability and polarizing power are directly proportional to the covalent character. Okay, so here the polarizability of the anion is obviously directly proportional to the size, right? You can easily see that the larger anion will have lesser force of attraction to the nucleus, so they can get easily distorted. Okay, now what about charge? What do you think? Directly proportional or inversely proportional? Polarizability. There can only be two answers, directly or inversely. Okay, maybe in the chat box. Anybody wants to put? Oh, there are so many chats. Hi. There are so many. I think I didn't see difference between the electronegativity of atom, hybridization. Like what are these? What are the question I asked you? Answer this, people. Aditi Srivatsan.
Sir, for deciding polarize, the answer was polarized for polar compounds, no, sir. That
Okay.
dipole.
Understood. Ionic character and covalent compound. Understood. Okay. So Harni says it's directly proportional. Okay. So anybody else concur with that? Or anybody wants to object that? Okay, so since nobody is supporting Harini, I will support you. Yes, your answer is correct, right? So there was one support. I missed it. Who is that? Yeah, Aditi also supports her. Yes. So yeah, so obviously, okay, it's pretty understood, right? More and more charge means more and more is the number of electrons, and more is the number of electrons. Obviously, I can say that there is higher chance of that electron cloud to get distorted. Okay, so both charge and size is directly proportional to the polarizability of the anion. Obviously, covalent character also is directly proportional to the size, and it's directly proportional to the charge of the anion. Okay, fine. Let me again, we'll take some examples. Right. Say if I have okay, something like this. I have NaF, Na2O, and say Na3N. Okay, so I have, again, we see that all the cations are same, right? But the anions are different, right? So now obviously you can see that this is F minus, this is O2 minus, this is N3 minus. I told you more and more is the charge, more and more is the covalent character. So obviously Na3N is more covalent than Na2O, and the most ionic or least covalent is going to be NaF. Okay, right? Now the same thing if I ask you for, say, I have LiCl, NaCl, KCl. Now, if I have these three compounds, right? Now, what you see is the anions are same, Cl, 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 but the cations are different, Li plus, Na plus, and K plus, right? So obviously now the amount of charge is same. All of them are having monopositive, right? Now, whenever you have this kind of things coming, whenever you have the charge to be same, only then you have to go for the size. Charge has more role to play than the size. Please understand that. Okay, charge has more dominance than the effect produced by your size, right? So what do you think? What is the order of covalent character?
Sir, it's LiCl in the first, then NaCl, and then KCl.
Yes, absolutely. Right. I told you, Siddharth, you say that LiCl is the least covalent. Is that your answer? Right. So please understand, when you look at the Fajon's rule, or when you look at this thing, I told you covalent character, I'll write it as CC for now, right? Covalent character is directly proportional, or I'd say it's inversely proportional to the size when it comes to cations. Right? When you go for cations, the covalent character and size are inversely related, right? So obviously out of this Li, Na, and K, obviously the highest size is for potassium. So that will have the least covalent character, and the smallest of them all is lithium, right? So that is going to have maximum covalent character. You just have to remember the rules. That's it. Pretty simple, right? So LiCl will have more covalent character than NaCl, and NaCl will have more covalent character than KCl. Okay, one more question. Say if I ask you NaF, NaCl, NaBr, and okay, say I have NaI also. If you want, say we'll take it, right? So now arrange them in the order of covalent character. Quick.
Sir, NaF less than NaCl, less than NaBr, less than NaI.
Yeah, correct. So NaI is going to have the maximum covalent character, right? Because I told you covalent character is directly proportional to the size when it comes to anion. That's the rule. Or see, you don't have to mug up the rules. You can always follow the logic. Please follow the logic. That is all. Like obviously, when you initially itself, when you follow the logic, now when you do some 5-6 problems, automatically the rules will go into your head. You don't have to worry about say by hearting it. You don't have to do that, right? So fine. So the answer is correct. So you have NaI to have more covalent character than NaBr than NaCl, and the least covalent or the most ionic is NaF. Right? Okay. So yeah, that's about Fajon's rule. Okay. So we finished the chapter. Done. Right? We have seen from on normal Lewis structures. Now see where we ended up. Right? So we learned a lot of stuff. Okay, so I think guys, you have to write a test on general organic chemistry. I think you have to write at least two tests on that. So let me speak with the management. Let me speak with Akila and let you know when you will write the test. And how about this thing? What is that? Your DPPs? Are you practicing?
Yes, sir. The isomerism one, I did that.
Okay, isomerism you did. Good. Okay, see in DPP, there are problems will be really good quality problems. So if you're not able to solve it, please do not get discouraged, because the quality of problems are such that you will not get this tough problems in your actual JEE exams. You don't have to worry, but you prepare for the best, right? Okay, so anybody else is doing the DPPs? Right? Okay. So guys, let me remind you again, you have paid some money, right? You have come here for a reason. It's not only attending classes. We already spoke about this in the first class itself. The role of the faculty is just going to be only 20 to 30% when it comes to competitive exams preparation, right? And it's high time. You know how much time we have, you know how much we have to complete. You have to go on par with me. Like the ideal scenario is that when I teach a concept this week, you solve problems from that week and come back to me and ask me questions and like squeeze me with questions. That should be the attitude which you must be having, all of you, right? It's not for one, it's not for two, it's for everybody, right? You have to squeeze me. See, since we have a very short amount of time, right, I might not give you all the information there, but it's not like I don't know the information, right? If you want to know, you will just hit at the right points, right? When you see someone that who you can squeeze and get the information out, you do it with all dignity. There is nothing wrong, right? So please make sure that you're solving problems, you're bringing it to me, or some way you are trying to know the solution for that. Okay, and again I repeat, the most important difficulty or the most difficult situation you will face when you're solving problem is patience and discouragement, in the sense that when you're not getting answers, you might get frustrated, you will lose your patience, you'll get discouraged, but it is a pretty absolutely normal. Okay, because of that, if you're not going to try, then what is the point you even attending this course, right? And then you don't even have to write the exam, because that is the quality of thing you will expect in the exam also, right? And why are you even writing the exam, right? So it's high time, people. Next time when I ask you how many of you are solving the DPPs, I want all the 8 or 9 people in the class to say, yes sir, we are doing it confidently, right? So that should be the spirit. And if this is the case with chemistry, I don't know what you're doing with mathematics and your physics. They should have completed more chapters than me. Obviously they are going a little fast, right? So I don't know what happens there, but again, all three are important, right? The ideal scenario would be for you to spend at least 3 hours per subject per day on exclusively problem solving. I would say okay, half an hour, 1 hour to go through the theory, but most of the time 2 hours, right, should go for problem solving only, exclusively, right? And if you want to talk to me with something, like if you want to have if you have some personal problems, anything, you have my number, you can always contact me, right? So whatever help I can do from my side, I'm absolutely, see, I am also a student. I know how what are the difficulties we face right now. Like I wrote the exam called JAM. I don't know whether you know of it. So see, the knack of any competitive exam, clearing any competitive exam is similar. The knack is very similar, only that the content is different, right? Say for CAT exam, it's going to be quants. It's for JEE, it's physics, chemistry, math. For NATA, it's going to be architecture. But every competitive exam, the method or the knack of clearing those exams is pretty simple. You have to solve a previous year's problem. You have to spend more time on solving the questions. You have to concentrate on the weaker areas. So these are the stuff. There are small things which you have to take care. But obviously the content is different. How much content is there? That is also different, right? But the knack of any competitive exam, IAS, UPSC, whatever it is, all competitive exam have same methodology of approaching the exam, right? So if you want to talk something about it, you are always welcome, right? Do not feel shy. Do not. If you're not able to speak to other faculties, I don't know. I think Nitin, like Raghav, everybody is still, almost everybody is young, right? So I think if you're not going to utilize this opportunity, right, and I see so much potential, guys, right? If I actually am telling you, like the group, there is no one that I can say that no, you are not capable of clearing the exam. I see everybody has some potential. Everybody has at least the whenever you're in class, from what I see from the class, is that at least everybody is interested. Everybody wants to know new things, right? So, but that's not it, right? What you do in the class is not going to be sufficient, isn't it? Right? So when you go home, you're spending only 1.5 hours, but you have the rest of the week for you. What you do in that time, that's what matters. Okay, so fine. It's high time that you go for this, solve questions, and I'm always available online in WhatsApp. You can just click a picture and send me. I can solve it to you right away and send it to you back. Right? Fine. Any questions regarding this or the exam preparation? Any questions, people? Oh, you used to pay this thing. Wrong symbol. Okay, Siddharth. Cool. No issues. Right? So I hope there are no questions. Right? So we'll meet next week. I think I will have extra class this week also, maybe on, I'll tell you the week. Other than the Saturday, Sunday, I will take one more day. Okay, fine. Because we missed 2 classes for Diwali. Right? So we'll go to that. Right? Okay, guys. Thank you so much. We'll meet again next week.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.